Hey pals, welcome to WP Roundtable episode 175, another fun milestone episode with one of the coolest guests I've ever had on this show. There is no doubt about that.
How are you?
I just looked at the bottom of the screen and I noticed 175 and I thought, sure.
I'm flattered. I don't know why. Like, of all the interesting people in WordPress, I can think of, 25.
174.
Yes, 174 people who are more interesting than me.
Well, me too, it looks like. No, this is great. This is great. Like, you're a very interesting person and do a lot of really fascinating things that I'm excited to talk about. There's no way I'm going to even come close to running out of questions for you. In the way I'm going to even come close to running out of questions for you in the time that we have today. So this will be really fun. That you're up to. We're going to share our quick picks of the week. This is the fun part of the show where we just drop something that we think is worthy of sharing. It could be a new blog post, plugin, story, or a great beer that we've tried. Anything to me, but we are one of the smaller cities, especially US-based cities, to have a WordCamp. And I'm pretty proud of what our little community has managed to put together.
Yeah. I mean, you know me, my definition of a WordCamp is like super base. Like if you get
super base.
Super base level. Like if you get 50 people in a room talking about WordPress all day, that's a WordCamp. The Wi-Fi isn't required. The coffee technically isn't required, but I don't know if you've ever seen a WordPresser without coffee. It doesn't go super well.
Right. You know this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's my quick pick. That's what I want to promote. Go to jackson.wordcamp.org, buy your ticket, whether it's 2018 or 2019. This WordCamp is going to continue, so buy it. Regardless of the year that you're watching this. Josepha, do you have anything to share?
Anything that I would like to share?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing that everyone is having shared around right now is probably my same thing. We have the call out to try Gutenberg in core as of the release on Thursday. And so that's a really exciting thing. It's a big change for the community. It's a big change for the project. And so I want everyone to get out there and really stress test this tool because we want it to be perfect and usable in a way that that is really going to change the face of how people work with our tool. So.
Oh my goodness. That's totally true.
I know, right?
Yep. That Gutenberg thing. Super fun and super big for this project. Man, you said it. It's a big deal. And we need to all rally together to make it go smooth.
Yep.
Let's talk about your background, Josepha. I want to dive into that a little bit and understand a little bit better how you ended up here, where you are today, working at Automattic and being a liaison for all of us community organizers, like the go-to person who answers all our questions, amazing events.
Like I didn't know it existed. And my mom, I was like a starving artist at the time. And I called my mom and let her know that I was coming to visit. And she said, you can come and visit, but you should know that I'm going to this conference. I have a spare ticket if you want it, which is like 80% of WordPress origin stories include somebody saying, I have a spare WordCamp ticket. And so
I don't know if it's 80% it was their mother who gave them that spare ticket.
That is a good point. So she gave me this spare ticket and I was like, I don't know what any of these people are talking about, but I'm going to write everything down because when I do understand it, I'm going to want to know what to search for. So that's like when I got started. And then went into data analysis and market strategy after college to pay the bills, basically. Right? Because who doesn't take a super hard job to pay the bills?
Sure.
And so I did that for a number of years. And while I was doing that, I also was really active in my local community around like getting diversity in STEM and inclusion in STEM, a lot of women in technology sort of work that I was doing.
In Kansas City still?
In Kansas City,
okay.
Yeah. And so a lot of what I was doing was exactly the sort of work that I do now, but on a much smaller scale. And so I was doing that, and I did a lot of work with like nonprofits to help them get their infrastructure up to speed, from like marketing and website stuff all the way down to like, these are your basic processes as a nonprofit, and this is the stuff that you need to change as you're moving forward. And so as far as goals go, I always kind of have been a nonprofit sort of person. I've spent a lot of time working in that space and helping people to change other people's lives for the better, any way that I can. And so it all sort of fit in there. I don't think I ever had like a life goal of working at Automattic, and I certainly never thought that I would be doing what I am doing now, but it's definitely a dream job if you look at my career over time. So yeah.
So you from years ago, glimpsing where you ended up, wouldn't particularly be surprised, maybe?
Exactly. Yeah.
Surprised, maybe?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So all those different like organizations that you were helping, was that through like just a single employer that you had during that time, and those were the companies you helped, or were you independent or bouncing around?
Yeah, I was doing that all on a volunteer basis. I generally feel like if you ever had a point in your life or in your career when you wish that you had a helping hand from somebody, that if you succeed at whatever your goal was, like you should then extend that helping hand as well. And so like I know that as I was getting into the technology space, like the only mentors that I had available to me were men. And not because there weren't women around, but because there weren't any in my space that I was working in. And so I went out of my way as soon as I got into a position where it was possible, where people were like aware that I was doing technology stuff and aware that I was trying to help with diversity and inclusion things. Like as soon as I got into a space where people in the city recognized that about me, that was the time when I was like, okay, and now I'm going to offer my advice and my help to anyone who wants it, basically. And so, yeah.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Then how about the transition from you go to the first WordCamp to ending up here? Did you get involved in some way professionally?
Yes and no. So I went to a WordCamp in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is where I'm from. And we had never had one in Kansas City. Not because we didn't try necessarily, but because we had a few stops along the way that were a little difficult. And so I got home to Kansas City and I was like, well, Fayetteville's tiny. Like, why have they had one and I haven't had one? And so I got together a group of people and I was like, hey, does anyone want to like organize a WordPress community with me? And they did, magically enough. And then actually it was my involvement in that helped to also jumpstart my work in STEM in the city. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you found like real applications for the technology that you were learning about.
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you got to get a little bit hands-on and familiarize yourself with the platform and just use it and for like real life things before you even had a professional reason to care.
Yeah, so the marketing shops that I've worked with prior to coming to Automattic were almost entirely like Drupal and proprietary CMS type spaces. And so I actually did very little professional work with WordPress until I actually like got into this job. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Like every year they'd be like, tell us which open source CMS is the best. And I'd always be like, WordPress is the best. And they'd be like, we're going with Drupal because those are the developers we have.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. That's fun. Then you were doing that before you came across this Automattic opportunity.
Oh, so I came across the Automattic opportunity like late in 2014. I went to WordCamp San Francisco. I had been at the marketing agency for like 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years by that point. And I went to WordCamp San Francisco and I ended up at the community summit, which was really strange to me because I was like, I'm just a hayseed from Kansas City. Like, who cares what I have to say? So I ended up at the community summit and met just the most fascinating people in the entire project. And you know, I'm good at organizing things. And so I was helping to kind of organize. The last day of the summit said to me, she's like, are you interested in like doing this like as a career, like as a full-time job? And I remember distinctly, I said to her, well, of course I do. Because like, as I mentioned before, this is my dream job. Who doesn't want to do it full time? And then like 2 weeks later, she sent me a message. She's like, by the way, I see that you have not applied for the position yet. So I need you to do it. And I was like, whoa, I will do that. And I remember that I looked application and sent it through, and then, here I am. So
it's fascinating that you would feel that. Like, why would you feel that way? The experience that you described sounded quite fitting and like the right ramp to that point.
Yeah, and especially for me, so like a lot of the career risks that I've taken over the course of my career have been substantial. Like I'm not very risk averse when it comes to what I do with my career. And so like you would absolutely think that based on everything that I just said about what I've done for a living and for volunteer work, all the way up until that point would have been like, I can do all of this. But like the size and the scale of the work, I think really was daunting to me. And everything moves so fast. And, getting involved with the community, I had tried to get involved in like specific other parts of the community other than the WordCamp program and meetup program. Like I really hadn't succeeded. I had so much trouble getting onboarded and actually continuing the as it. We all are sitting out here feeling like we're making it up as we go, hoping that nobody finds us out, and assuming that there's someone out there who knows how to do this way, way better than we do all the time. And it's not always true, especially in an open source space. We are one of the oldest open source software projects out there. And so we cut our teeth on a lot of stuff ahead of people.
Wow. Yeah. What was so 2014? That was like that would have been in October. Mm-hmm. So we're almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And things were getting pretty formalized at that point. And there was probably a team of people doing this sort of thing. So quite a precedent, but still smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
Yes. Walk us through a little bit of what it was like initially, maybe contrasted with, the scale of things right now.
Oh, yeah. So I remember at the 2014 Community Summit, a lot of what we were trying to do at the time was document everything, partially to like make sure that you can get it historically documented so that anybody can know what newcomers in mind. They try to be fairly light on jargon, things like that. Mm-hmm. But the biggest difference is between when I came on and volunteers who are able to give, an hour a week to the project, and they have something that they can do and something that's pretty easy for them to pick up whenever they do have a chance. And so we see a lot more involvement, a lot more activity, a lot more discussion, and I think also a lot more measured approach to what we do in especially the community space because of that, because we have so many people who are looking at the bugs that we have in our system. And we have a bunch of teams who are working on their handbooks and their documentation, and a bunch of newcomers these days who are coming through and saying, hey, I tried to follow space and open up this fantastic and interesting. Well, just to contextualize my next sentence. I think that it's rarely the case, especially in open source software, that for people who hold positions like me, they should stay in that same sort of guiding space for all of time. Our skills in specific things start to deteriorate because we don't use them. So like I haven't built a WordPress site in 4 years. So there's that. And so like keeping the information fresh, I think, is really important. And so all that to contextualize what I'm going to say next, which is I hope that my impact when I move on into whatever my next career phase might be is absolutely leaving the community as a whole, the project as a whole, with this ability to kind of communicate quickly and effectively across our cultural barriers so that onboarding people and helping everyone to improve their current circumstances is just part of the everyday plan. Like changing lives is not one of those things where you're like, my plan today is to make 3 people's lives better. Like that's not a goal people have. But I think that if I can leave this project with barriers to entry that are low enough but easy to work your way through, and then also a set of really giving and caring people that that understand that the knowledge that we have is only it, as opposed to being depleted as we share that.
Wow, powerful. And, and inspiring.
Oh, good.
And it's like in a similar way, I'm curious to understand a little bit more about where you try to like focus your energies. Like if you look around, there are probably
identify the things that are worth focusing on and things that I can affect. We have a lot of competing priorities, and I don't mean competing priorities in like the time way, like not deadline way, but like anytime that you get as many people working on something as big as we have, you have a lot of different reasons for why something should be listed above something else as a priority. And so I have actually a pretty like, hold on one second while I get out my leadership book. I have a pretty standard rubric for like things that I know that I need to send off to people who have more people who are at that than me. But then the second, just like logistics part of my management process for my own personal priorities is a thing called the Eisenhower box, where President Eisenhower said that if it's urgent and important, then you should deal with it now. But if it is urgent and unimportant, then you can deal with it later. And if it's not urgent and not important, then you can, deal with it any other time. If anyone's watching, you can tweet the Eisenhower box. There's like a whole wiki article, and then people will know. So there's that. But also, the second part of your question, where you said things that I can actually help with. I really try to act as a force multiplier for everybody that I work with. It's really easy for me to fall into the trap of like, I know how to do this thing. It's faster if I do it than if I teach you how to do it. But also, as far as like the health and longevity of this project as a whole that I care deeply for, and the health and longevity of the people who are contributing to this project, who I also care deeply for, I think that the best thing that I can do, and that I try to do every single time that I get into these situations, is to make sure that the tools that I would have used to handle whatever problem they're about to deal with are taught to them and are passed down to them. And the reason that I pulled out this handy dandy list, it's 6 pages long. This is my list of like just individual leadership hacks and tips that I tell myself over the course of a week, because I really think at some point I'm going to need to write these all down so that people don't just have to go to me and be like, what's in our toolkit for having a fight cross-culturally? Or
a bit about your
division lead for DOT organization. So I lead the division that has most of the people who give back to the WordPress project. We have 4 teams in there and a bunch of people who also work in our space but are not inside the division. So that's what I do there. And the way that translates out into the community, some people have been pointing out lately that they're seeing me in a lot of channels. And a lot of the work that I do for the community is basically blocker removing and also information dissemination. I help each team kind of make sure that they have their highlights and their lowlights brought to my attention so that I can help get their problems solved and also celebrate their wins with them. Because we're all just like a bunch of volunteers working on the thing we love the most. And if no one helps us to celebrate our big success in the thing that we loved the most over there, it can really be disheartening. And so, yeah, I do a lot of cross-team collaboration and uncovering of problems and solutions kind of collectively that way.
Okay. And you have in the past done some other things. So maybe quickly run through like the steps to this point, or if
the meetup program, outreach and inclusion work, and then also with the training team. Did I say the training team already? No, meetups, training, and outreach and inclusion. So those were the three things that I was primarily brought on to do. About a year into that, maybe a little less, I actually took over TARDIS and led them, and therefore led our community practice as a whole. Kind of got our 501c3, our nonprofit, and our for public benefit charity sorted out and tidied up and moved in the right direction. Helped to implement a lot of the changes that the community had been needing and wanting and advocating for a number of years. And then after we kind of got our biggest changes made to not only the way that worked, but the way that we brought people in and the way we onboarded, I led Apollo for a while at Automattic, which gave me some insights into the core process and how that team works, and helped to work a little bit with their onboarding processes, specifically for like the folks who do release stuff, not development, because I'm not a developer, and also advocating for design in that space as I went. And now all of those teams are led by their own team leads, and I help all of them to do that type of work on a day-to-day.
Well, that's pretty cool.
When I started, it was just the one team with like 6 people, and now we are 4 teams, and I think we're out to like 30, 35. It's big.
Yeah. That's totally different, like completely different. Like when you was before, all of that is extremely serious and not to be taken casually.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. That's a lot of different teams that you've had an opportunity to be involved in. And so you've been privileged, I guess, enough to get to see the ins and outs of different parts of this, community project, and really like home
that are roughly like ours, because they're, as far as I have been able to find, are only there's maybe one community that's remotely like ours that has the really hyper local monthly meetup style events, and then also an annual big event, of individual one-on-one high touch onboarding processes breaks down a lot, and it's hard to see the right way to like remove a little bit of the one-on-one onboarding, let it be one-to-many, but still keep that community. But I do think that if we continue with our type of onboarding and with our type of training in the skills required that we have to do, which in a lot of cases is show up, do enough of the research of our last 15 years that you don't make anybody mad, and then know the right person to ask about how to get started. I think that we're quickly getting to a point where that scale is going to be out the door. And on the community side, I think you're aware of this. We've been kind of piloting, which is that we do a lot of like research and learning and quizzes ahead of time, and then people at various points in the process can figure out what their own adventure that they're going to choose is. They can choose to be a WordCamp organizer. They can decide that they want to help teach other people how to organize events as an open source methodology, or they can decide that they care a lot about onboarding, but they're actually developers, and so they're going to go to core and help other people get started too. So we have, I really think in the last 2 or 3 years, created enough connections between all of the teams that we have that we're seeing a lot of cross-pollination of thought, which I think is only going to serve us for the better in the future, especially as we continue to get bigger and bigger. But I think also that our super local communities, the meetup communities, are really our lifeblood. I think they are the thing that makes our community so unique and so capable of being resilient in the way that we are. And so I really cherish that part of our program, and it is by far the best gateway to experiencing this community as I knew it when I got started with it. So.
It certainly is, and that's like another thing that is pretty tough, because the WordPress community has had figure.
And just a note on that, and we're getting into like these philosophical spaces. So folks on the live stream, if that's not what you were hoping for, trust me, it's interesting. But like, still, things that we excelled at the most in the community section of our project was changing the opportunities that people had to communicate with us. Because you were saying like there's that balance between enough touch points with people who can tell you what we are working on and not working on, so that you don't like work on something that's completely outside of what anyone's going to agree to put into core, right?
Yeah.
And it's a really tough balance. And there was a point, I know, for our space at least, where really the only time that people would talk to each other from either direction was if someone was mad. So like the community would get mad at us and they'd tell us very loudly a lot how mad they were. And that was the only time we heard from people. Change, as opposed to when you're happy with it. And so of course it's a lot harder to like encourage people to tell you the good stuff. And so the way that we handled that in the community space was to really increase our number of touch points with everybody. We started having like open office hours and like bunches and bunches of people who don't want to have express permission for this thing that I'm working on, because it's sort of related, but it's not literally the focus that was laid out. And so I'm going to work on it, but like I've heard enough from people that I can tell that it's fine for me to work on it. Like we want to make that possible, because we have no way of knowing all of the various types of intersections that we have in this community. And if we always only go with our one primary thought and never hear from other people when things are going well, when things are going bad, when they could be slightly better than they are, then we really can lose track of what direction we're all headed. And so I always feel like the primary combatant to fear is knowledge. And so when I see people kind of reacting in this like panicked, oh no, I'm mad at you now sort of space, it looks like fear to me. And so I'm like, all right, okay, let me tell you everything I know about that part, and then see if all of this knowledge will help you to feel less scared of it, less worried about it. So
way cool. I'm sure very good to me. Real evangelizers for the platform and for this community, and just like over and above. Like we know people who have the WordPress logo tattooed on their bodies. We know people who attend an alarming number of WordCamps, like at great personal expense, and participate in every way possible. What's the place for that right now, for just people being on fire?
I think there's always a place for people to be on fire about things. I think there's always a place for passionate voices, especially, of course, when they are in support of the work that is going on with the community that they love. Which is not to be heard as like, I want to squash all dissent. I think dissent is healthy in an organization that is running as it should. Like if you literally never hear anything bad about what you're doing, then either something's very wrong, or also something's very wrong. Like those. Yeah. But yeah, I think that we have a lot of people who are incredibly passionate about WordPress and its value and worth in a lot of the world. A change in the community that I'm starting to see, just from a 10,000 foot view of it, is that in our older parts of our community, people are being less likely to like go do wild offshoots of things. And in our newer parts of the community, they still are. They're still like, but maybe you've never thought about WordPress with a green background instead of a blue background. Like, people are still really excited about things in our younger parts of our community, and that's natural. I think that all organisms like us, as you grow older and get more maturity in your processes and in how things work and the way that things tend to pan out, the more measured that becomes. It's like a river, you know, little young rivers are like little tiny streams and they're going all wild and crazy. But the older and older that those rivers become, they become wider. It's a lot harder for it to turn. It just does its own thing altogether. And so in our older spaces, I really see that a lot. And in our younger spaces, we're seeing people who are ready, just like raring to innovate, and they're bringing us new and interesting ideas about what to do in the community, how to help with the various team structures that we have, just all these interesting ideas every day. Folks will be coming from, but I'm keeping an eye out on them.
Yeah.
Figure out where they are. Figure out where the cool hip WordPressers are. Be like, tell me all your neat ideas.
It's gotta happen. I mean, there's always room and you know, investment coming in as the market proves viable.
I mean, in that way, I think it's really important also for us to all remember that every minute change that we make to the tool itself, to core, you know, that changes everything for 31% of the internet. I was talking to the core Gutenberg team about this the other day. With that new release on Thursday, we got this influx of feedback, which has been really good to have. But there is that moment a bit where like you feel like there's something not right there, because people are fighting back in ways that you weren't expecting, or the feedback is really not where you thought it was going to come from. Like, it's a different group of people, it's a different market, something like that. And I remind all of my folks of this. One, every minute change that we make happens across 31% of the web. And that means that we're changing people's workflows and potentially their livelihoods. And that's a heck of a thing to fuss with. And we don't know the effects of that. We don't know the impacts of that because of the way that our tool works. Like, no one has to sign up and register for using WordPress. And so we don't have a lot of access to that, and there's not a clear way for them to get that feedback to us. So we just have to be aware that that is out there and that we are doing those things. But also the size of our community, not the people who are actively contributing, but like literally anybody who has contact with WordPress, even if they don't know that what they're using is WordPress. It is so vast that every change that we make is going to make someone mad, because we are a gigantic collection of minorities at this point. Like, everybody has this small niche of people that they could really, really perfectly fit well with. And so like, we just have to do our best to not make the same people mad about the same things every single time. Because we can't get it right every single time, but we can get it a lot right most of the time for enough different types of people that that we don't alienate any one group fully. If you're saying things, I can't hear you because you're.
Sorry. Yes, I was. Sorry. We had a baby crying. Wise words, for sure. Fantastic. Another topic, because I know it's something that is very important to you and you've worked a lot on in the past. And it's something that I am doing everything I can to learn as much about and try to contribute to as much as possible. I'm told, I don't know that this is true, but I'm told that WordPress, as far as tech communities, is not too bad.
Yeah.
Pretty good when it comes to being inclusive and like gender diversity issues.
Mm-hmm.
Not too bad. Yeah. Lots of room for improvement.
Right.
But you know, something that maybe other tech communities could still learn from. Yeah. But we have lots of room still to improve.
Yeah.
And you know, I would love to give you an opportunity to just like a little platform to like help me as just somebody. This is not your responsibility to my actionable tips
Yeah.
for how someone like myself who has some influence in a few small areas like really make a difference in that.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And I'm first going to say that, especially for me, um, it is absolutely reasonable for you to say, hey, help me figure out how to do this. I am an educator and an awareness raiser in the space. Like, I understand that thought that you had about, like, I'm supposed to be teaching myself. You're not supposed to teach me. For people who hold the sorts of positions that I hold, it's absolutely appropriate to ask for help and guidance. So you did the right thing. Second thing, second thing, as just like a general, hey, everybody who is scared and or learning about this, or not scared and still learning, one, get out there and try your best. Two, make a mistake. Like, try hard enough that you make a mistake. And then once you've made the mistake, be open to someone giving you some guidance about where you went wrong and figure out how to do it better. It actually is Pippin Williamson who once said to me, if you're not making any mistakes, then you're just not trying hard enough. And I think that's true. If you always stay in a safe space, then in a safe area where you know you can accomplish something, then you've never had any personal growth. So that's my overall blanket statement. For WordPress, in that people who are in what's considered the dominant culture can to be more comfortable and more aware, like let people be more aware of them, and give them a clearer voice. Some quick things you can do immediately, which is, one, if you see someone trying to ask a question or provide some thoughts or insight, and they're getting spoken over by somebody, like, for instance, if I'm trying to say something and Kyle, you're talking over me, then let's say it's Gary Pendergast's responsibility to say, hey, it sounds like Josepha had something to share, and just let it out to help have a more diverse group of people in your own local space. Related to that is, if people are trying to help those voices that are having trouble being heard actively by themselves get heard, then just to personally amplify it. So if a woman has tried to provide some insight into development and she's being spoken over and people and no one is listening to that either, you can say, this is the thing that has just been shared to us by Juliet, and just like amplify the voice that way. So those are a couple of really quick, low risk, high reward things that you can do in your own local community. As far as things on a larger scale for technology in general, I think that finding those underrepresented voices in any space and sharing their perspective is good, not only because their perspective is good, but because having somebody who looks, like me, can make it so that anybody else who is not just a random Kansas Citian show up and feel comfortable knowing that we have those people and the leaders value their opinions and their thoughts, and so therefore they'll value my opinions and thoughts. It's hardly ever that active a thought process. No one goes to a WordCamp and they're like, if there are no Asian women, that means they hate Asian women. Like, that's not what happens. But it's, yeah, those are two quick right now things you can do. Some general, like, overall technology and WordPress things that you can do. And I think that from an educator's perspective, the thing that is always beneficial is to take part in those conversations in your own communities that are about like ways that we can make sure that the digital divide has been bridged, that we have a clear understanding of technological literacy versus digital literacy, and encourage the parents as well as the children to come along with those things. That's a really big one. That's like a, hey, when you're ready to get involved in city council,
Sure.
you may not help you make the most change in this particular type of area.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And I appreciate it, because it definitely is good encouragement and lots of good ideas in there.
Yeah.
And I'm really not satisfied with the results that I'm getting from the efforts that I'm making, which is a driver for me, like product. Look satisfied with the results of those efforts.
I mean, if your individual one-on-one outreach isn't working, or if you feel like you personally just don't have that, it has been really helpful in Kansas City. And I know that my mom in her WordPress community does the same thing, is to reach out to the business coalitions that are already geared toward those people. So we have a Latinx group, a business group in Kansas City that we reach out to every year and let them know, hey, like, we've got speakers. Maybe someday we're going to get a Spanish language track, which would be like my most exciting thing ever. And do active outreach. If you're looking for a way to get your outreach to be the most meaningful, focus your outreach on those groups that you know need the most outreach. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one thing to just tell all of your Twitter folks, hey, we have speaker applications open, and into those business groups that are related to what we're doing, but for whatever reason are underrepresented in your own personal community, and say, hey, partner with us to promote our event and have your people come to us, and we'll partner to make your event more visible as well, which has been a pretty useful tactic in Kansas City, and also in my home area of Fayetteville, Arkansas. So.
Wow. Okay, that's really good advice.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd love to continue talking more about these topics, because they do fascinate me. We're obviously just scratching the surface, but our hour's just about up. So I've got a couple of kind of wrap up questions for you, Josepha.
Sure.
All right. First, I would love to know real quick a little bit about some of your personal hobbies and what do you do outside of work?
So I try to find a different way to say it, but that's not it. It's a choral group. It is a bunch of semi-professional singers who do incredibly difficult work. We just released our German Requiem album. It is one of the only versions done in English with the Shaw translation, which is a big deal. And it came out to incredibly positive feedback, which was interesting because by and large, everybody hates the German Requiem because it's really hard to listen to. And so our reviews of it were incredibly thoughtful, and it really speaks well of our artistic direction. So that's one thing that I do in my spare time. I also have a dog that I play with in my spare time. She is snoring to my left. I was hoping she was going to come say hi to you all, but she's not even kind of interested. And then also, I am, I think the old-ish school term, because it was only like 2 or 3 years ago, is foodie. But I get together and have themed food parties with my friends, probably about once a quarter. We have a prohibition party and a BLT party and an eggnog party. Like, it's just like the things that we're gonna come and make the best of this thing.
That sounds like way too much fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Where will people bump into you in person over the next, the rest of this year?
So, especially in the next few months, I'll be next week in Chicago for WordCamp for Publishers. I'll be at WordCamp New York. I'll be at WordCamp US. At a lot of WordCamps is where I'll be. I'm trying to speak at other non-WordPress events as well, so that we can get that knowledge sharing going. So some Drupal events out there, some PHP events out there. I'll be speaking at some of those. Those are your most likely places to bump into me in person for the remainder of the year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any great recommendations of guests that I should have on this show in the future?
Whoa. Gosh, off the top of my head, I'm going to be honest, 174 episodes. I don't think I saw everybody that you have in here. Can I take a rain check and give you just like a list of 5 later?
Sure. Yeah. Whatever works for you.
It doesn't help anyone who's talking to us here today, but that's all.
It'll help them because we'll eventually see them on this show.
Ta-da!
Right. All right, Joseph, and all about your story and getting your great advice, very actionable for things that I personally care about. Cool. And just getting your take on like just big, broad topics about what this community is going through. It's fascinating. I wish we could talk for 3 more hours, but
chatting with, and so I'm glad that I was in that list.
Of course.